Alex had always been the kind of person who lived for adventure. Whether it was skydiving over breathtaking landscapes or exploring hidden alleys in foreign cities, Alex thrived on excitement. But there was one thing that set Alex apart from most travelers. They loved pushing boundaries, not in a dangerous way, but more like testing how far they could go before someone said, "Stop." It wasn't malicious. It was just their nature to crave a little thrill, even if it meant bending rules now and then. This time, Alex's destination was London, a city steeped in history, culture, and grandeur. The trip had been planned for months, and Alex couldn't wait to soak in all the iconic sights: the Tower of London, Big Ben, the Thames River, and of course, Buckingham Palace. There was something magical about imagining themselves standing in front of the palace, surrounded by its regal aura. Little did Alex know that this visit would become a story they'd never forget, but not for the reasons they expected. On the morning of the big day, Alex woke up early, buzzing with energy. They dressed casually but stylishly, slipping on comfortable sneakers perfect for walking around the city. Grabbing their camera and phone, they headed out into the crisp London air. As they walked toward Buckingham Palace, the streets grew busier. Tourists from all corners of the world milled about, snapping photos and chatting excitedly. Street performers entertained passers-by, adding to the lively atmosphere. When Alex finally reached the gates of Buckingham Palace, their breath caught in their throat. The palace stood tall and majestic, its golden ornaments gleaming under the sunlight. Surrounding it were impeccably dressed royal guards, standing so still they looked almost like statues. Their bright red coats and towering bearskin hats made them instantly recognizable. Crowds gathered around, marveling at their discipline and precision. Some visitors tried to get their attention, waving or making funny faces, but the guards remained completely unfazed, as though nothing could distract them from their duty. Alex watched in fascination, feeling both amused and impressed. These guards weren't just ordinary soldiers. They represented centuries of tradition and honor. Yet, as Alex stood there observing, an idea began to form in their mind. An idea that started as a tiny spark of mischief, but quickly grew into something bolder. What if they could break through that stoic exterior? What if they could make one of these legendary guards crack a smile, or better yet, move from their spot? The thought sent a jolt of excitement through Alex. They glanced around, noticing the barriers keeping tourists at a safe distance from the guards. Surely, no harm would come from stepping slightly closer, right? After all, it was just a bit of fun. Alex smirked to themselves, already envisioning the hilarity of pulling off such a stunt. Without giving it much thought, they decided to take action. Little did they realize that sometimes actions have consequences, and karma doesn't waste time delivering its lessons. As Alex stood there, the wheels in their mind turning faster than ever, they began to craft a plan. It wasn't enough just to admire the royal guards from afar. Alex wanted to interact with them, to see if they could elicit even the slightest reaction. The idea was simple yet daring. Get close enough to one of the guards and try to bring them into the crowd. Maybe a light tap on the shoulder or a playful gesture would do the trick. After all, how often did someone get the chance to test the famous discipline of the Buckingham Palace guards? Alex's heart raced with anticipation. They had always been the type to dive headfirst into situations without overthinking the consequences. This wasn't about causing trouble. It was about having fun, right? At least, that's what Alex told themselves as they scanned the area for the perfect opportunity. The guard closest to them seemed like the ideal target. He stood tall and proud, his posture impeccable, his expression unreadable. To Alex, he looked almost too perfect, like a character straight out of a history book. The crowd around the palace was thick, but Alex didn't let that deter them. They edged closer to the barrier, pretending to take photos while keeping an eye on the guard. A family nearby laughed as their child waved enthusiastically at the soldier, only to be met with the same stoic silence. Watching this, Alex felt even more determined. If a child couldn't break through that wall of discipline, maybe they could. And wouldn't it be hilarious if they succeeded? The thought made Alex chuckle under their breath. But getting past the barriers wasn't going to be easy. Security personnel were stationed nearby, keeping a watchful eye on the tourists. Signs clearly stated that visitors were not allowed to cross certain lines or interfere with the guards. Alex hesitated for a moment, glancing at the warnings. Rules had never stopped them before, though, so why should they now? With a deep breath, Alex decided to go for it. They figured that if they moved quickly and casually, no one would notice. Besides, it was just a harmless prank. What was the worst that could happen? Alex's confidence grew as they rehearsed the plan in their head. They'd step forward, reach out, and give the guard a friendly nudge. Surely, the guard would have to react somehow, right? Even if they didn't smile or laugh, the mere act of breaking their rigid stance would feel like a victory. Alex imagined the shocked faces of the onlookers, followed by laughter as everyone realized it was all in good fun. It would be a story worth telling back home, a tale of boldness and humor that would make their friends laugh. What Alex didn't consider, however, was the gravity of what they were about to do. These weren't just ordinary people standing in uniform. They were highly trained soldiers carrying out a duty steeped in tradition and respect. Their job wasn't to entertain tourists, but to protect and uphold the dignity of the monarchy. Every movement, every glance, every second of stillness was part of a centuries-old practice. But in Alex's excitement, these details faded into the background. All they could focus on was the thrill of the moment, the chance to create a memory that would stand out among the countless others from their trip. With a final glance around to ensure no one was paying too much attention, Alex took a step closer to the barrier. Their pulse quickened, adrenaline coursing through their veins. This was it, the moment of truth. Little did they know that karma doesn't wait for apologies or explanations. Sometimes it strikes instantly, leaving no room for second chances. But for now, Alex was blissfully unaware, their mind consumed by the thrill of the prank they were about to pull off. With a mischievous grin, Alex took the final step toward the barrier, their eyes locked on the guard just a few feet away. The air seemed to crackle with tension as they leaned forward, stretching their arm out to tap the soldier's shoulder. But instead of making contact, something unexpected happened. Before Alex could even touch the guard, their foot caught on the edge of the raised curbstone that lined the barrier. In an instant, their balance faltered, and they stumbled forward awkwardly. Time seemed to slow down as Alex flailed their arms, trying desperately to regain stability. But it was no use. Gravity won the battle, and Alex landed hard on the pavement with a thud. Their phone, which had been clutched tightly in their hand, flew out of their grasp and skidded across the ground, leaving a streak of scratches on its screen. A water bottle, a map, and a pack of snacks spilled out of their bag, scattering around them like confetti. The once confident prankster now sat sprawled on the ground, cheeks burning with embarrassment. The crowd, which moments ago had been focused on the guards, turned their attention to Alex. Some people gasped, others whispered among themselves, and a few couldn't help but chuckle at the spectacle. For Alex, the fall felt like it lasted forever, each second stretching longer than the last. They scrambled to pick themselves up, brushing dust off their clothes while avoiding eye contact with anyone nearby. The guard, meanwhile, didn't move a muscle. His expression remained as stoic as ever, as if nothing unusual had happened. If anything, his unwavering composure only made the situation more humiliating for Alex. As they stood there, clutching their bruised knee, Alex became acutely aware of how foolish they must look. This wasn't part of the plan. Not at all. They had envisioned laughter, maybe even applause from the crowd, but definitely not this. Instead, they were met with silence broken only by the occasional muffled giggle. Even worse, security personnel stationed nearby immediately noticed the disturbance and began moving toward them. One officer gave Alex a stern look, shaking his head slightly as he approached. For the first time since arriving at Buckingham Palace, Alex felt a pang of regret. What had started as a playful idea, a harmless bit of fun, had spiraled into something far less amusing. The adrenaline rush that had fueled their confidence earlier was replaced by a sinking feeling in the pit of their stomach. As the reality of the situation sank in, Alex realized they might have gone too far. Crossing boundaries was one thing, but this was different. Karma, it seemed, didn't waste any time delivering its lesson. Alex's attempt to disrupt the guard hadn't succeeded. In fact, it had backfired spectacularly. And as they stood there, surrounded by curious onlookers and approaching officers, they couldn't shake the feeling that this moment would stay with them for a long time. It wasn't just the physical pain from the fall or the embarrassment of being watched. It was the dawning realization that their actions had consequences. The question now was whether they'd learned from this experience, or let it become yet another reckless story in a series of poor decisions. As Alex stood there, still reeling from the fall and the sudden attention they had unintentionally drawn, two security officers quickly closed in. Their expressions were calm but firm, radiating authority without saying a word. One of them knelt down briefly to check if Alex was okay, his tone professional yet laced with concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. Alex nodded sheepishly, brushing off more dust from their clothes while trying to regain some semblance of composure. But the officer wasn't done. Once it was clear Alex wasn't seriously injured, his demeanor shifted slightly, still polite, but noticeably sterner. "Do you realize what you just did?" he asked, his gaze locking onto Alex's. The question hung in the air like a heavy cloud. For a moment, Alex hesitated, unsure how to respond. They wanted to laugh it off, to make it seem like no big deal, but something about the officer's tone stopped them. It wasn't anger, it was disappointment, mixed with a sense of duty to protect the integrity of the palace grounds. Alex tried to play it cool. "I was just having a little fun," they said, forcing a nervous smile. But the words sounded hollow even to their own ears. The second officer shook his head slightly, clearly unimpressed. "This isn't a place for fun like that," he replied firmly. "These guards are here to perform an important role. What you did is not only disrespectful, but also against the rules." The weight of those words hit Alex harder than they expected. Until now, they hadn't thought much about the significance of the guards beyond their iconic appearance. To Alex, they were part of the tourist experience, a photo opportunity, a symbol of London's charm. But hearing the officers speak made them realize there was so much more to it. These weren't actors posing for pictures. They were real soldiers carrying out a sacred tradition. Each guard represented centuries of history, discipline, and service to the monarchy, and Alex had treated it like a game. The officers explained further, their voices low but authoritative. "You crossed barriers that are there for a reason," one of them said, pointing to the curbstone Alex had tripped over. "That's not just unsafe for you, it disrupts the entire area. People come here to respect this institution, not to create disturbances." As they spoke, Alex felt smaller and smaller, shrinking under the weight of their actions. They glanced at the crowd, noticing the mix of disapproval and curiosity on people's faces. Children who moments ago had been excitedly waving at the guards now looked confused, whispering to their parents about what had happened. To make matters worse, the officers informed Alex that incidents like this could have serious repercussions. "We take breaches of protocol very seriously," one of them said. "Depending on the situation, this kind of behavior can lead to arrest, or even deportation." The word deportation sent a chill down Alex's spine. They hadn't considered that their silly prank could escalate into something so severe. Suddenly, the idea of being escorted out of the country felt terrifyingly real. For the first time in their life, Alex found themselves speechless. All the confidence and bravado that had driven them to attempt the prank dissolved into shame. They nodded quietly, listening intently as the officers finished their explanation. When they finally spoke, Their voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I didn't mean any harm," Alex muttered, looking down at their scuffed shoes. "I just thought." "I don't know what I thought." The officers exchanged a glance, perhaps sensing Alex's genuine remorse. While they didn't soften their stance entirely, they seemed willing to give Alex a chance to make things right. "Come with us," one of them said, gesturing toward a nearby station, where further discussions would take place. As Alex followed them, limping slightly from the fall, they couldn't help but reflect on how quickly everything had spiraled out of control. What had started as a harmless joke had turned into a lesson in humility, and possibly something far more consequential. After being escorted away from the scene, Alex found themselves seated on a bench just outside the palace grounds. The security officers had allowed them a moment to collect their thoughts before deciding whether further action was necessary. Though they were no longer in immediate trouble, the weight of what had happened pressed heavily on Alex's shoulders. Their knee throbbed from the fall, and their hands trembled as they picked up their scattered belongings, trying to stuff everything back into their bag. But it wasn't the physical pain that bothered them most. It was the overwhelming sense of embarrassment and regret. For the first time since arriving in London, Alex sat quietly, observing the world around them instead of rushing headfirst into it. Families gathered near the gates, marveling at the guards with wide-eyed wonder. Children pointed excitedly at the towering figures in red coats, their laughter filling the air. Parents gently reminded them to stay behind the barriers, reinforcing the importance of respecting boundaries. Watching these interactions, Alex felt a pang of guilt deep in their chest. They realized how selfish their actions had been, not just toward the guards, but also toward the other visitors who came to experience the dignity and tradition of Buckingham Palace. As they replayed the events in their mind, Alex couldn't help but cringe at their own behavior. Why had they thought it was okay to treat something so meaningful as a joke? Sure, they'd always been someone who pushed limits, but this was different. This wasn't about testing rules for fun. This was about disregarding the significance of an institution that meant so much to so many people. The guards weren't props or performers. They were real individuals carrying out a duty steeped in history and honor. And Alex had disrespected that in front of hundreds of people. The officers returned after a few minutes, their expressions still serious but not unkind. "We've decided not to press charges," one of them said, his tone measured. "But we need you to understand why your actions were unacceptable." Alex nodded fervently, relief washing over them, but also a renewed sense of responsibility. The officer continued, explaining the role of the royal guards in detail, their training, their sacrifices, and the pride they took in representing their country. Each word painted a clearer picture of the gravity of what Alex had done. Feeling a mix of emotions, shame, gratitude, and determination, Alex knew they had to make things right. As the officers walked away, leaving Alex to reflect further, an idea began to form. What if they could turn this negative experience into something positive? Instead of brushing off the incident as a mistake, they could use it as an opportunity to learn and grow. With newfound resolve, Alex decided to return to the palace later that day, not to cause more trouble, but to apologize sincerely. When evening fell, Alex approached the palace once again, this time with a completely different mindset. They waited patiently near the barriers, watching the changing of the guard ceremony with genuine admiration. Afterward, they sought out a supervising officer, explaining their intentions calmly and respectfully. "I want to say I'm sorry," Alex began, their voice steady despite the nervous flutter in their chest. "What I did earlier was wrong, and I feel terrible about it. I didn't mean any disrespect, and I promise I'll never do anything like that again." The officer listened carefully, his expression softening as Alex spoke. When they finished, he nodded slowly. "Apologies are important," he said, "but actions matter more. Show us, and yourself, that you've learned from this." His words struck a chord within Alex. It wasn't enough to simply say sorry. They needed to prove through their behavior that they truly understood the impact of their actions. Walking away from the palace that evening, Alex felt lighter, as though a heavy burden had been lifted. The fall, the confrontation, and the apology had all been humbling experiences, but they had also been transformative. For the first time in a long while, Alex realized that adventures didn't always have to come from breaking rules or seeking thrills. Sometimes, the most memorable moments came from learning, growing, and showing respect for others, for traditions, and for oneself. The rest of Alex's trip took on a completely different tone after that pivotal day at Buckingham Palace. Gone was the reckless thrill-seeker who jumped into situations without thinking. In their place stood someone more mindful, more curious, and genuinely eager to appreciate the beauty and depth of London. The fall, the confrontation with security, and a heartfelt apology had left an indelible mark on Alex, reshaping how they approached every experience moving forward. Instead of chasing adrenaline-fueled antics, Alex began immersing themselves in the city's culture and history. They'd visited museums, walked along cobblestone streets, and listened intently to tour guides sharing stories about landmarks like St. Paul's Cathedral, the Tower of London, and Westminster Abbey. Each stop became an opportunity to reflect, not just on the rich heritage of the places they explored, but also on the lessons they'd learned during their misstep at the palace. One afternoon, while wandering through Hyde Park, Alex stumbled upon a group of locals gathered around a street performer playing classical violin. The music was hauntingly beautiful, drawing cheers and applause from the crowd. As Alex stood there, swaying slightly to the melody, they noticed something remarkable. Respect flowed naturally between the performer and the audience. People tipped generously, clapped enthusiastically, and maintained a polite distance to give the artist space. There was no pushing, no disruption, just mutual appreciation. It struck Alex, then, how powerful respect could be, not just as a concept, but as a way of connecting with others. This newfound perspective extended beyond tourist attractions. Alex started engaging more deeply with the people they met along the way. At a cozy cafe tucked away in Covent Garden, they struck up a conversation with an elderly woman who shared fascinating tales about growing up in post-war London. Over steaming cups of tea, she spoke fondly of her memories of royal weddings, parades, and how the monarchy had always been a source of unity for the nation. Her words painted a vivid picture of pride and tradition, making Alex realize how much meaning these symbols held for so many people. It wasn't just about pomp and pageantry, it was about identity, history, and belonging. Even simple moments felt richer now. On a quiet evening stroll along the Thames, Alex paused by the Golden Jubilee bridges to watch the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink. For once, they weren't rushing to capture the perfect Instagram shot or searching for the next big adventure. Instead, they simply stood there, soaking it all in. The gentle hum of the city, the distant chime of Big Ben, and the steady flow of the river beneath them. It was peaceful, grounding, and exactly what Alex needed to process everything they'd been through. By the time their trip neared its end, Alex knew they were leaving London changed in ways they hadn't anticipated. The city had taught them valuable lessons about humility, respect, and the importance of understanding traditions before attempting to challenge them. What had started as a carefree vacation, filled with daring escapades, had transformed into a journey of self-discovery. And though Alex couldn't undo the embarrassing incident at Buckingham Palace, they were grateful for it. After all, it had been the catalyst for growth, a reminder that sometimes life's greatest adventures aren't about seeking thrills, but about learning to see the world through new eyes. As they packed their bags and prepared to head home, Alex made a silent promise to themselves. This shift in mindset wouldn't end when the plane touched down. Back in their everyday life, they vowed to carry these lessons forward, to approach experiences with thoughtfulness, to treat others with kindness, and to embrace opportunities for growth whenever they arose. Karma might have delivered its lesson swiftly, but Alex was determined to ensure it stuck. When Alex returned home, the first thing they did was sit down with their closest friends over coffee to share the story of their London trip. But this time, It wasn't the exaggerated tales of wild adventures or daring stunts that dominated the conversation. Instead, Alex recounted the incident at Buckingham Palace, the fall, the confrontation with security, and the humbling realization that followed. They spoke openly about how their attempt to bring one of the royal guards into the crowd had backfired spectacularly, teaching them a lesson in respect and humility. At first, their friends laughed. How could they not? The mental image of Alex tripping over a curbstone while trying to prank an unflinching guard was undeniably funny. But as Alex continued, their tone grew more serious. They explained the gravity of what they'd done, emphasizing the importance of respecting traditions and boundaries. I thought it was just harmless fun, Alex admitted, shaking their head. But I didn't realize how much those guards mean to people. They're not there for entertainment. They're part of something bigger than me. Their honesty struck a chord with everyone at the table. One friend leaned forward, nodding thoughtfully. It sounds like you really learned something from all of this, she said. Another chimed in. Sometimes we need moments like that to check ourselves, you know. Like a wake-up call. Alex agreed wholeheartedly. Sharing the story felt cathartic, almost like closing a chapter they hadn't realized needed closure. It wasn't just about reliving the embarrassment. It was about acknowledging the growth that came from it. Inspired by the experience, Alex decided to take things a step further. They began incorporating their newfound perspective into other aspects of their life. For instance, when planning outings with friends, Alex suggested visiting museums or historical sites instead of seeking out risky thrills. At first, some of their more adventurous pals raised eyebrows, but soon enough, even the skeptics were won over. Exploring local history turned out to be far more rewarding than anyone expected, sparking lively discussions and deepening their appreciation for their own community. Alex also made a conscious effort to listen more and act less impulsively. Whether it was letting someone else lead during group activities or taking the time to understand different viewpoints before jumping to conclusions, they found joy in slowing down and observing. This shift didn't go unnoticed. Friends remarked on how much calmer and more considerate Alex had become. "You seem grounded now," one of them said during a weekend hike, "like you're actually present instead of always chasing the next big thing." Even online, Alex shared their transformation subtly. Rather than posting flashy photos or boasting about reckless exploits, they started sharing thoughtful reflections on social media. A picture of the Thames at sunset came with a caption about finding peace in stillness. A snapshot of St. Paul's Cathedral included a note about the beauty of tradition and craftsmanship. These posts resonated deeply with their followers, many of whom reached out to say how inspiring they found Alex's words. Perhaps the most meaningful change, though, was how Alex approached challenges moving forward. When faced with situations where they might once have acted impulsively or without considering consequences, they paused. They asked themselves, "What am I trying to achieve here? Am I being respectful? Will this add value or just chaos?" More often than not, the answers guided them toward wiser decisions. Looking back, Alex realized that the incident at Buckingham Palace wasn't just a momentary lapse in judgment, it was a turning point. Karma had delivered its lesson swiftly and decisively, but Alex chose to embrace it rather than resist. In doing so, they transformed what could have been a regrettable memory into a catalyst for personal growth. And while they knew they'd never forget the sting of embarrassment from that day, they also understood that it had given them something far more valuable, a renewed sense of purpose and perspective. Months after returning from London, Alex found themselves reflecting on how much their life had changed since that fateful day at Buckingham Palace. What started as a reckless prank had turned into a defining moment, a lesson in humility and respect that continued to shape the way they navigated the world. It wasn't just about avoiding trouble or following rules anymore. It was about understanding the impact of their actions and striving to be someone who added value rather than disruption. One evening, while scrolling through old photos from their trip, Alex paused on a picture of the palace gates. The image brought back vivid memories. The stern faces of the guards, the murmurs of the crowd, and the sharp sting of embarrassment when they fell. But instead of cringing, Alex smiled softly. That moment, though painful, had been a gift in disguise. It had forced them to slow down, think critically, and see the bigger picture, not just in travel, but in life itself. In the weeks and months that followed, Alex noticed subtle yet profound changes in their behavior. They became more patient, both with others and with themselves. When disagreements arose among friends or family, Alex no longer rushed to assert their opinion. Instead, they listened carefully, seeking to understand before responding. This newfound patience earned them respect and strengthened their relationships. People began turning to Alex for advice, trusting their thoughtful approach to problems. Even their sense of adventure evolved. While Alex still loved exploring new places and trying exciting activities, they approached these experiences with a deeper appreciation for context and meaning. On a weekend getaway to a nearby national park, for example, they spent hours reading up on its history and significance before setting foot on the trails. During the hike, they pointed out interesting facts to their companions, sparking lively conversations about conservation and environmental stewardship. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and by the end of the trip, everyone agreed it was one of the most memorable adventures they'd ever had. At work, too, Alex's transformation made waves. Previously known for taking risks without fully considering outcomes, they now approached projects with meticulous planning and collaboration. Coworkers noticed the shift, praising Alex for their attention to detail and ability to anticipate potential challenges. One colleague even joked, "Whatever happened to you in London must have been life-changing." Alex laughed but didn't elaborate. Some lessons were best kept personal. Perhaps the most rewarding part of this journey was how Alex shared their story with others. Whether it was mentoring younger colleagues, advising friends on making better decisions, or simply sharing anecdotes about their travels, Alex used their experience as a teaching tool. They weren't afraid to admit their mistakes because they knew those moments of failure were often the ones that taught us the most. "Karma has a funny way of working," Alex would say with a grin. "But if you let it, it can guide you toward becoming a better version of yourself." As time went on, Alex realized that growth wasn't a destination. It was an ongoing process. There were still days when old habits crept in, tempting them to act impulsively or overlook details. But each time, they caught themselves, reminded of the lessons learned in London. That fall outside the palace gates had been more than just a stumble. It had been a wake-up call, urging them to live with intention and purpose. Looking ahead, Alex felt excited about the future. They dreamed of traveling again, not to chase thrills, but to immerse themselves in new cultures, traditions, and perspectives. Each destination would offer another opportunity to learn, grow, and connect. And whenever doubt or uncertainty crept in, Alex would remember the stoic guard at Buckingham Palace, whose unwavering discipline mirrored the resilience and grace they hoped to embody in their own life. In the end, Alex's misstep became a cornerstone of their personal evolution. Karma may have struck swiftly, but its true power lay not in punishment, but in the chance it gave Alex to reflect, apologize, and change. Through humility and determination, Alex turned what could have been a regrettable memory into a story of redemption, one that inspired not only themselves but everyone lucky enough to hear it.